freedom or death. We gas ourselves up, but we short on breath. Talking about we eating, but who we really cooking. Dreaming about greens, but ain't nobody looking. No land, no acres, no seeds in the ground. When the hunger hits, who's gonna be around? We starving every day, and it just ain't the food. Feeding the hood garbage, got 'em acting a fool. We flossing with rides, stunting with chains, but these bars we spitting just bring more pain. We guilty as hell, preaching all these lies, selling debt to the kids, and we acting surprised. We commercialize the pain, broadcast the grief, tell the youth to hustle, but hide the beef. We glorify the trap, invite them to the flames, just like Reagan brought the crack on planes. Back in the 80s when the streets got soaked, my people, my brothers, all got choked. Reagan said no trades, but we know the deal. He left us in the dirt, man, that shit was real. I was just a shorty watching it unfold, old enough to see how we got sold. War on drugs, but it was war on us. Cops on our necks, no love, no trust. They labeled us thugs, beast on the block, made us kiss the pavement while they cleaned our clock. Prison became business thanks to Reagan's game. Free labor is the truth in America's name. Slavery's dead, man. That's just a word. Read the 13th Amendment, it's still absurd. They lock us in cages, serving time for life. Double digits for wisdom, cutting sharp like a knife. I'm here to say, the chains in the air, it's time we break free, start showing we care. No more flexing for nothing, no more selling out. It's time to rise up, time to end the drought. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is. I guess it's 11:45. Man, I got a show for y'all today. So I'm gonna talk about, show y'all a video about Malcolm X's final warning, and I feel like it's a lesson for today's urban conservative. So with that being said, I'm gonna get into independent music, and that is Don Tripp, Teardrops, and I'll be right back right after this.
DT the kid. Sometimes you gotta let them tears fall. Take some time, they say it heals all. My heart is numb, but I still feel it all. Sometimes I wish I could forget it all. Yeah, here we are. You'll never heal if you don't ever stop picking at every scar. You sit and wait for the perfect moment, you'll never start. Pride can be your greatest strength and your biggest flaw. I be holding grudges, but that shit come with a cost. So some of my problems ain't never gonna get resolved. I wanna apologize and I'm never accepting y'all's. No, fuck them all, every person that walked. You figured the grass was greener, now stay the fuck off my yard. Stay where the fuck you already are. The damage is like a Sharpie, it left a permanent mark. We ain't washing it off and we ain't wasting the talk. Call it mission control, communications is lost. I'm sharp as a razor blade from cutting some niggas off. I gained some peace of mind that ain't considered a loss. I never point fingers cause I'm who's really at fault. I should've loved them motherfuckers from afar. It's best to let them tears fall. You tried to block me, but I still ball. Yeah, I left you tickets at the wheel call, so you can watch me as I win it all. Fuck you thought, UPS. No matter the weather, I'ma deliver. One monkey can't stop my show, I'm a gorilla. I ain't much into fashion, guess I'm a simple nigga. But I drape my wife in Mason Margiela. Jella, Ella, ayy. This ain't an umbrella, it's a AK. And I brought the blade, that's just icing on the cake. I feel like Pooh Shiesty, bring the clapper on stage. I'm lit like I clicked the glow stick in the rave. Nothing personal, I don't get pissed, I get paid. You can't get to the money when your feelings in the way. So cry yourself a river till your issues swim away. When life give you lemons, I tell you what Piff would say. Add promethazine and make you some lemonade. Death before dishonor to me is a fair trade. And I'm stepping in the rain wearing suede. It's best to let the tears fall. Yeah. Take some time, they say it heals all. My heart is numb, but I can feel it all. Yeah. Sometimes I wish.
Damn, it's really being slow today. A little weird.
Wish I couldn't feel it all. Yeah. Sometimes you gotta let them tears fall. Yeah. I need more time, my shit ain't healed at all. Yeah. My heart is numb, I still feel it all. Yeah.
That's Don Tripp with Teardrops. What I wanted to talk about this morning a little bit, I'm going to talk about Sabari in Minneapolis, and then I also want to talk about Shiloh Hendricks in Rochester, Minnesota. So there's a few things that I do want to talk about this morning. But first, I want to educate people about Michael. I don't know why I keep on saying Michael. Malcolm X's final interview before his death. So this was just days before Malcolm was killed. And I think we really need to get to the answer because, a lot of people are pushing this, we should be peaceful. We should be doing all this. But should we really be peaceful while, we're having police officers and National Guard on Southeast DC be searching people that they shouldn't be? Trump talking about going to Chicago, but I really want to talk about the start of it. I want to go back 50 years ago. I think it's 50, might be 60, probably 60. But I want to talk about Malcolm X because a lot of people don't talk about Malcolm. A lot of people do not talk about Malcolm, and that, I believe, is somebody that we need to be talking about. So with that being said, here is Malcolm X, his final interview before his death.
Whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of people.
This is an interview they buried behind decades of slogans, textbooks, and whitewashed documentaries. One where Malcolm X didn't just criticize America, he accused it. He didn't call the United States racist, he called it criminal. In this interview, calm, clear, and precise, Malcolm lays out what no one else dared to say out loud, that what was happening to black Americans wasn't a civil rights issue. It was a human rights crime. But to what extent did he go that made them delete the interview? Let's get into it.
We believe that our problem is one not a violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights. Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we're denied the right to be a human being.
So I said to him, "No, Nigel, not without the brie."
To understand what Malcolm X exposed in this interview, you have to drop everything you've been taught about how America works. Every textbook, every speech, every pledge, all of it rests on one central illusion: that America was a good idea poisoned by bad individuals. That racism was a glitch, a few bad apples, a chapter, something we just had to evolve past. But that's not what Malcolm saw. What he describes, calmly without raising his voice, is something far more damning: that the entire system was built from the beginning to reduce black people into a permanent underclass. Not by accident, not by oversight, but by deliberate strategic design. This is not about slavery in the past. It's about how that same logic was repackaged after emancipation. The plantations became prisons. The overseers became police. The chains became policies. From housing and education to voting and employment, every institution was structured to limit movement, limit growth, and limit visibility. Malcolm isn't shocked by inequality. He expects it. He's not surprised that black Americans are poor, policed, and forgotten. He's saying that's the point. That's how the system knows it's working. What makes this interview so devastating is that he's not angry. He's analytical. He's a man laying out a diagram of oppression, like a mechanic showing you the blueprint of a machine that functions correctly, a machine that produces exactly what it was designed to: control. And here's the most dangerous part, the one that gets ignored in mainstream retellings of Malcolm's legacy. He doesn't blame individual racists. He doesn't waste time on people who use slurs or wave Confederate flags, because in his view, that's theater. The real problem isn't hatred, it's architecture. Nonviolence at its core is a powerful idea. It takes discipline, courage, and clarity of purpose. But in America, Malcolm saw something far more sinister taking shape. He saw nonviolence being transformed from a moral stance into a domestic public relations campaign. The United States didn't fear peace. It marketed it. It wrapped itself in it. As long as the resistance was quiet, controlled, and neatly televised, the system could keep functioning in the background, untouched. You could have marches. You could sing hymns. You could even get beaten in front of the cameras. Just don't ever cross the line into self-determination. This is what Malcolm understood better than anyone, that peace, when stripped of power, becomes performance. And performance is exactly what America needed to clean up its image while keeping its machinery running. Think about it. The government gives you a holiday for Martin Luther King, builds statues, names boulevards, but the very economic and political systems King fought against, still standing.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Toms. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
That's the trick Malcolm saw coming decades earlier. He warned that if the movement wasn't careful, it would become ceremonial, harmless, respected, but irrelevant. A museum piece, not a revolution. And the scariest part? It worked. By elevating peaceful protest as the correct way to resist, the system rewrote the rules of legitimacy. Now, if you shouted too loudly, you were aggressive. If you defended yourself, you were dangerous. If you rejected moderation, you were an insurgent. Nonviolence became a velvet leash. Malcolm's problem wasn't with peaceful people. His problem was with a power structure that only respected black voices when they posed no threat to white comfort. You could be heard, but only if you were soft. You could be seen, but only if you smiled. You could demand dignity, but only if you asked nicely. This is how America contained the movement without ever saying it was against it. They handed out awards. They televised marches. They met with protest with polite nods and legislative breadcrumbs. But the deeper systems, land theft, generational poverty, state violence, stolen labor, political exclusion, those remained untouched. Why? Because they weren't interested in change. They were invested in optics. And nothing served optics better than a black leader who condemned violence, even if violence was being used against his people. Because the world could look at America and say, see, they're evolving. Meanwhile, the numbers never changed. The jails stayed full, the schools stayed unequal, the banks stayed closed, and the police stayed brutal. That's what Malcolm meant when he dismissed symbolic peace. It wasn't about healing, it was about hiding. And let's be honest, it's still happening. Peaceful protests are praised as long as they're passive. But let a community speak without asking for permission? Let people refuse to turn the other cheek? Suddenly, they're out of control. Militant. Insurgents. That's the legacy of this tactic, a system that commits violence, then criminalizes any resistance that isn't performative.
To solve the problem.
Black Muslims have sometimes, whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
Well, that's something of an argument, but I've heard speeches made by some of the people of your group. I think I've heard you make speeches. It seemed to me that you were advocating, well, I would have to describe, I think, as violence to meet the serious injuries that have been done your people, with which I totally agree.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property.
If you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start, check out Base 44.
Once you understand that America doesn't just manage oppression but packages it, you begin to see why it couldn't allow Malcolm X's next message to spread unchecked. Because Malcolm didn't just critique America's use of peace as propaganda, he directly challenged its monopoly on power. In America, resistance is only noble when it's powerless. But the moment that resistance refuses to die quietly, the moment it stops playing martyr, it becomes a threat. And Malcolm X understood that better than anyone. He didn't tell people to start riots. He didn't ask them to go hunting for vengeance. What he said was far more basic and far more radical. You do not have to let yourself be killed. This was not a call to arms. It was a call to dignity. Because in a society where black people were expected to absorb abuse, from police, from policy, from daily humiliations, even the suggestion of equal retaliation was treated like treason. That's why the media didn't report what Malcolm said. They reported how they felt about it. They didn't show the logic. They showed fear. And in doing so, they made self-defense look like aggression and turned survival into something dangerous. But Malcolm was drawing a line, a human one that exists across all cultures, all histories. The right to protect your life, your family, your property. America didn't deny that right to white people. It glorified it. From the Revolutionary War to the Second Amendment, American identity was built around self-defense. Farmers with muskets were heroes. Colonists who fought back were patriots. But when Malcolm said black people had the same rights, suddenly the rules changed. Why? Because the system had never prepared for the possibility that the people it dehumanized would refuse to stay in the box. Malcolm understood that you cannot teach a man he is fully human and then ask him to behave like a slave when danger arrives. You cannot preach equality and then recoil in horror when a black father decides his child's life is worth defending. The truth was simple. The lie was deliberate. Malcolm X didn't believe in violence. He believed in human worth, and he believed that worth deserved protection, even if the state refused to provide it. Especially when the state refused to provide it. Because when the law fails to protect you and the courts refuse to hear you and the police treat you like a suspect for breathing, what are you supposed to do? Pray?
Stop letting them increase your rates. I used to let them raise my car insurance every year until I found this huge loophole.
March? Wait?
I want to stop there for a minute because, I don't think a lot of people looked at Malcolm and what he was trying to do and what he was doing, because I think the media played Malcolm in a certain light. And to me, I remember having conversations with my grandpa. This is way back in like the early 90s. And, he always told me that the Army was no place for a black man, and that the first time he ever met a black person was when he went to the Army. And then, what's even crazy is because like my mom was from northern Minnesota, but then didn't meet any black people until she went to college. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we need to be honest here and to be for real is like to look at the truth and for what it is. Not that it's a conspiracy theory, not that it's somebody who's trying to be envious or somebody's jealous, but it's the truth. It's the truth that we need to realize that no matter how ugly it is, no matter how, because I will say this, a lie only hurts us more. Might not hurt right away, but it hurts us down the road. And, as I going into this new season of my podcast next week, because I'm going to start regular episodes Tuesday, September 2nd. And I really want to get into to show people like we're disenfranchised, especially when it comes to black people, because now our plight has been stolen and took. I'm gonna be honest with the LGBTQ community. I don't have nothing against gay people. I don't have nothing against trans. I don't have nothing against that. But if you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. If it's a child, they expect an adult to make that decision for them. And as an adult, should we be teaching kindergartners and first graders and second graders about all these other so-called pronouns and genders? No. I think we should be teaching the basics. So I'm going to get back into the interview with Malcolm X.
Number you protect yourself, not out of hatred, but out of responsibility. And that is why Malcolm became the enemy, not because he encouraged chaos, but because he encouraged clarity. Because he shattered the illusion that peace is the highest virtue for the oppressed. For him, the highest virtue was survival. In this interview, his tone doesn't spike. He isn't shouting, he's stating the obvious, that the expectation of submission is itself an act of violence. That the denial of self-defense is a deeper kind of control, one that forces you to internalize your inferiority. He didn't teach black people to hate white people. He taught them to stop hating themselves long enough to protect what was theirs. That's not radical, that's normal. But in a society built on imbalance, normal becomes revolutionary when placed in black hands. And that's why this idea, simple, rational, and universal, had to be erased. Because it threatened the deepest lie of all, that safety belongs to some and silence to the rest. Here's a quick reminder, please like, share, and subscribe to Black Culture Unlocked for powerful black news, real stories of our heroes and leaders, and the rich culture and history the world tried to forget. By now you have followed Malcolm X through a path that exposes the structure of American injustice, its global containment strategy, its exploitation of nonviolence, and its manufactured panic around black self-defense. But in all of this, one critical shift remains to be explored: how Malcolm himself was transformed into a symbol of fear, not by what he did, but by what he represented. Because Malcolm didn't just speak, he refused to flinch, and that scared America more than any riot ever could. See, the system wasn't designed to eliminate every rebel. It was designed to absorb most of them and neutralize the rest through fear. Make them doubt, make them hesitate, offer them partial rewards if they fall in line. Threaten them with poverty, exclusion, assassination of character, or worse. But Malcolm X was immune to that psychological campaign. That's what made him dangerous. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't water down his language to make white liberals more comfortable. He didn't ask how his message would play on television, and perhaps most fatally, he didn't fear what would happen to him if he told the truth. He was, in every way, post-illusion. And for the American system, that's an uncontainable threat. So what did they do? They turned him into a monster, not with facts, but with narrative. They built a character, a violent black man, angry, radical, anti-white, anti-America, dangerous. They ran his face through the same machine they used to process all threats: criminalize, demonize, distort.
One of the great challenges in this world
That's a very
is
good
knowing
point,
enough
because
about a subject
to be
to
honest,
think.
they did demonize Malcolm. You know, they to be in my eyes, you know, as I look back on history, it kind of seems like they fed us uh, Martin Luther King, but then really, in my eyes, like demonized. Now I won't say slander. You know what I'm saying, to a degree, because we had black leaders that were out here saying the same thing that like the feds were. You know what I'm saying? Like the same thing our government was saying. You had black people out here that were saying the same thing. And that's what I see nowadays, because even when it comes to people that buck the system, and it's the truth, you have people that get mad at them. Not because they're telling a lie, but because they're telling the truth. That's why you let me ask y'all a question, right? How many times that people uh have said various things, right? How come all the things that I've said, nobody has put a cease and desist on me or any of that? Because these next couple weeks, I'm really about to get into some shit when it comes to Sabari up in Minneapolis. I'm gonna say all the Mossad ties when it comes to the CIA, when it comes to Hamas, when it comes to that he's bribed city government officials. You know what I'm saying? So how is it that, you know, I really honestly feel like we have selective outrage. I'm going to be honest. I feel like we have selective outrage, and we need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of that, not because it it's hurting our communities, and it's hurting them big time. Because I will tell you like this: when you have people out here telling lies and demonizing people that are all trying to make differences and be truth tellers, because they're tired of the way that their government, or they're tired of city officials or county officials getting their necks or noses into something that they shouldn't even be involved in. And then not even that, but all the nonprofit organizations. You know, we can talk about you know, the ones that are supposed to be feeding our kids, are supposed to be feeding the hungry, but yet they're feeding their bank accounts. They're sending it to other countries. And we're not standing up to that, because it still happens in our community today, and people still look the other way. Instead of standing up and doing the right thing, because you know what's crazy is I see a lot of these police posts. It doesn't matter if it's from Grand Forks, or it doesn't matter if it's some buck ass town in Utah, or you know, whatever, blah blah blah. I hear the same ass things. See something, say something, do something. But when it comes to your own people, y'all don't do that. You hide it, you know, and that's why I feel like there's such a division in our communities, not because people are out here telling lies, but because people are exposing the truth. They're exposing their dirty little secrets that they didn't want nobody to know. You know what's crazy is, you know, me and Robert, well, I shouldn't say me and Robert, but Robert was doing something. He was sending me a couple things about uh, politicians, and he sent me something about a guy that ran for governor. I'm trying to think of it, if I can think of his name real quick. Because I just talked about it. John Grunseth. And it was crazy, because when you look this man up, the first thing you see is that he was in a sex scandal when he was running for governor, and he dropped out 9 days before an election. 9 days. So how? And it was a Republican candidate. It was a different party back then. They were, I think, independent Republicans or something. I don't know. Blah blah. It always changes. Whatever. Because now the DFL will soon be going by the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. If Omar Fatigue becomes mayor, this is, and to be honest, this is what I think Sabari wants. You know what I'm saying? He hasn't even put that much money into. I have to dig into that, but let me get focused. But I wanted to talk about Malcolm X, and the same thing that they did to Malcolm, they do to people today. You know what I'm saying? We're so comfortable calling people William O'Neills, but not having the proof, not have the evidence, not have the the truth on a person. You tell lies to make their situation seem worse than what it really was. And that's a problem here in Minnesota, because I will tell you like this. I've been in communities, and I'm only going to say communities, right? It's because I've been with the BLM, I've been with the Antifa, whatever they want to call it. And a lot of those times, I never agreed with. A lot of the times, I never agreed with BLM. You know, I was sitting there at, Derek Chauvin's trial, and I would see activists, and I'm only going to call them activists because we knew them, because these are people who they throw down our throats. These are the people that they made sure that you followed them. And we were following them into hell. Not that that was our focus, not that that's what we wanted, but because people were so blind, we were walking behind, people that were doing wrong. It wasn't the same wrongs. That's what I'll say, like a Jerry McAfee. They were doing this shit like a Jonathan Mason. How come, that's what I want to talk about something, because, we people always talk about, but let's talk about things that we can prove. So it's crazy to me how, maybe a lot of people don't remember, but I'm only going to talk about this for a second. But they used to have this group over in the cities called Men's Monday or some shit. And Reverend Christopher talked about this a couple years ago. I think it was last year. And how he sat in the meeting with about 9-10 other nonprofits. And the people were literally showing them how to give them kickbacks, how to start a nonprofit. Mickey Frost. That's what I'm saying. It's like, we don't do enough homework. The same thing that these people talk about feeding our future. I could put Bob Fletcher in there. I've been saying, what's the crazy thing of it is that people are so misinformed. If you go back, like 2022, I think it is, or 2021, I pulled up to a press conference that Keith Ellison was having with a bunch of other prosecutors. They were trying to get money to persecute our juveniles and make them, whatever. And I went to that. It was like me. I don't fuck with these people, but it was Damick, it was Cortez. But we had walked into the state capitol. Went to the press conference. But then we told Keith we weren't going to interrupt it. And still he started telling bullshit. Started telling lies. So when we started telling the truth, then they wanted to cancel it because it's not things they wanted people to hear. It's always been that way. Everybody wants to talk about, it's conspiracy theories. No, it's not. You have to follow the paper trail. You have to follow the money. Because if you're only looking at one side of it and not looking at both sides, that's a problem, because you're missing a lot. And I probably know I'm all over the place, but I'm going to get back to the Malcolm X.
And to his speeches would still see his image. They knew those people didn't need proof to be afraid, just posture, just a headline, just the word insurgent next to his name. That's how perception becomes policy. And this strategy worked because America didn't need to prove Malcolm was violent. It just needed to convince enough people that he could be. Because once you do that, the system doesn't have to justify surveillance, censorship, or elimination. It just points to the monster it created and calls it a safety precaution. And let's be clear, this wasn't unique to Malcolm. This same system has used this blueprint for generations. It used it on the Black Panthers, on Marcus Garvey, on Fred Hampton. It uses it now on organizers, activists, and intellectuals who dare to speak with Malcolm's clarity. Malcolm didn't give them the image they used against him. They built it to neutralize what he was: unshakable. And here's the deeper horror. By making him into a villain, they didn't just silence him in public, they isolated him in private. They made it harder for other black leaders to stand with him, harder for institutions to invite him, harder for the average person to listen without shame or fear. He became radioactive, not because of his words, but because of their distortion. This is how you erase a message without touching the microphone. But what makes this interview so unique and so explosive is that it catches Malcolm outside that frame. No anger, no shouting, just calm, razor-sharp analysis.
Those human beings.
Just before Pierre takes it, you've got a pretty good fighter and the world's heavyweight champion lined up with you to help out, yes.
And that's when the myth collapses. Because if Malcolm X isn't foaming at the mouth, if he isn't threatening violence, if he's just sitting there exposing the system, then the only thing scary about him is what he's saying. And that forces a new conclusion. He wasn't hated because he was violent. He was hated because he told the truth without blinking. And nothing is more dangerous to an empire than a man who's no longer afraid to speak plainly.
Then we're realizing that our problem in America, that we are black Americans, and we have a problem that goes beyond religion. We formed a group known as the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And the objective of this organization is non-religious, number one. Any Negro can belong to it. And the objective of that organization is to bring about a condition that will guarantee respect and recognition of the 22 million black Americans as human beings. We feel that the problem, number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts and taken into the United Nations in the same manner that the problems of the black man in South Africa, Angola, and other parts of the world, and even the way they're trying to bring the problems of the Jews in Russia into the United Nations because of violation of human rights.
For decades, the U.S. positioned itself as the guardian of freedom, the defender of democracy, the world's last line of defense against tyranny. It pointed fingers at fascist regimes, communist dictatorships, and apartheid governments, lecturing them on justice, rights, and the rule of law. But what Malcolm X understood, and what he dared to say aloud, is that this entire image was a geopolitical con, a scam powered by military strength, media control, and the carefully orchestrated silencing of its internal contradictions. How could a nation preach liberation abroad while practicing dehumanization at home? How could it claim to be the shining city on a hill while black children were being locked in substandard schools, black men were hunted by police, black families were locked out of housing, and entire communities were segregated, surveilled, and starved? This was the contradiction Malcolm put front and center. He saw that America's greatest strength on the world stage wasn't its economy or its army. It was its image. That image had to be clean, heroic, and moral, and black suffering threatened to stain it permanently. So the strategy wasn't to fix the suffering, it was to hide it. This is why Malcolm's call to take the black American case to the United Nations was more than a clever tactic. It was an act of global sabotage, the kind of sabotage that could collapse an empire's reputation overnight. Because once the world understood that the U.S. was committing the same violations it accused others of, it would lose its moral leverage. Its wars would be questioned, its treaties are doubted, its leadership is challenged, and the balance of global power would begin to shift. Malcolm understood the gravity of that move. He wasn't just making demands on behalf of black Americans. He was pulling the curtain back on America's entire international persona. He was saying, this country doesn't get to be the world's referee when it can't follow its own rules. And here's the brilliance of his approach. He didn't do it with slogans or protests. He did it with logic, with legal language, with the same framework America used to condemn others. He forced the contradiction into the open. He said, if you support the Jews in Russia, why not the black Americans in Alabama? If you condemn South Africa's racial caste system, what makes Mississippi any different? If you preach democracy, why do you assassinate your truth-tellers? These weren't rhetorical questions, they were indictments. And that's why this conversation, this calm and deadly interview, holds so much power even today. Because America still runs on that myth. It still wraps its wars, its markets, and its foreign policy in the language of human rights. But Malcolm showed us the foundation beneath that myth, and it wasn't justice.
How do you train your brain to be able to think faster when you're being put on the spot? You see, when someone asks...
It was branding. It was the strategic erasure of black pain in exchange for global prestige. And here's the most devastating part. The people he was trying to protect were being used as the evidence against themselves. Black Americans were trotted out as proof of progress whenever it suited the narrative, even while they were being crushed by the very state using their image. That's why Malcolm didn't want reform. He wanted exposure. Because once the world saw what was happening, it wouldn't be about race anymore. It would be about the law, about rights, about whether the global community was willing to hold its so-called leader to the same standards it demanded from others. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted a trial. And in this interview, he lays the groundwork for that trial. Not with fury, but with facts. Not with outrage, but with clarity. He saw that America's true fear wasn't rebellion. It was being seen.
Of himself. For a white man today, sir, after kidnapping millions of black people from Africa, stripping them of all human characteristics and relegating them to the role of chattel or cattle or animals, commodity, merchandise that could be bought and sold at will, and then 100 years since the Emancipation Proclamation, using every type of deceptive method to further us into slavery, called second-class citizenship, I think that it would take a whole lot of nerve for white people today to ask Negroes, do they hate?
Malcolm X didn't just say black Americans were being denied rights. He said they were being denied existence, not in a physical sense. Black bodies were everywhere, in fields, factories, prisons, schools, and graveyards. No, Malcolm's point was deeper, more devastating. Black people weren't being treated as defective citizens, they were being treated as non-persons. And in the American system, that's not a glitch. That's part of the operating software. See, the U.S. Constitution begins with "we the people." But Malcolm understood that the entire history of black life in America was about being systematically excluded from that definition, not just politically, but spiritually, culturally, and existentially. From slavery to segregation, from the 3/5 compromise to mass incarceration, black identity had been constructed not as part of the American story, but as its foundation. The labor, the exploitation, the pain, all essential to building the country, but never enough to belong to it. And when black people demanded inclusion, they weren't met with dialogue. They were met with suspicion, with surveillance, with silence, or with slogans. Hollow, empty promises that dissolved under pressure. Malcolm saw this for what it was, not resistance to progress, but a refusal to even accept black people as human beings with agency, with rights, with autonomy. That's why he didn't waste time asking for equality under someone else's definition. Because if the system is built on a false view of who counts as human, then asking for inclusion in that system only reinforces the lie. What's the point of civil rights if the government doesn't even see you as fully alive?
Why did no one tell Minnesota drivers about this new rule?
If you are currently insured, drive less than...
That's the question Malcolm was asking, not directly, but through every frame of this interview, through every calm response, through every word that refused to bend to respectability politics. He wasn't looking to be accepted, he was asserting something more dangerous. I exist, whether you accept it or not, and I will defend that existence. This was the power of Malcolm's message, and this was the exact point where the American state recoiled, because if black people started seeing themselves as human without waiting for white validation, the entire racial hierarchy would begin to fall apart. That hierarchy depends on permission. It depends on the idea that your identity, your worth, and your future must be granted, not claimed. Malcolm rejected that dependency. He refused to wait for the courts, refused to wait for Congress, refused to wait for liberal approval. He took what every person is born with, the right to life, the right to self-definition, the right to protect what is sacred. And he said, "We are not asking any more." That shift, from seeking permission to declaring presence, is what made him revolutionary. It's also why he couldn't be co-opted. Most radical figures get softened over time. Their messages get polished, made safe for classrooms and coffee mugs. But Malcolm's core truth refuses to fade. He wasn't asking for rights as an American. He was demanding recognition as a human being. And that's a different war entirely. Because once you frame the issue that way, the entire debate about progress collapses. You're no longer arguing about policy tweaks or symbolic gestures. You're looking at a system and saying, "You were never meant to protect me. You were built to erase me." And once that truth is named, everything changes. You stop asking. You stop explaining. You stop apologizing for the volume of your voice, the anger in your tone, or the firmness in your stance. You stop begging to be seen. You start moving like you never needed to ask in the first place. That's what Malcolm X modeled, and that's what terrified the system. Because he didn't just call out injustice, he rejected invisibility, and in doing so, he redefined resistance itself.
No, I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
In a world built on fear, fear of punishment, fear of loss, fear of being erased, Malcolm X became something rare and uncontainable, a man who had nothing left to fear. And that's when he became unstoppable. You can silence a man who wants money. You can buy off a man who wants power. You can threaten a man who's scared of dying. But what do you do with a man who's already accepted the cost? What do you do with someone who's already walked away from safety, from status, from every comfort the system offers in exchange for submission, and still keeps walking? That's what Malcolm X was. Not fearless in the reckless sense, fearless in the precise sense. A man who had already counted the cost, already faced the consequences, and chose truth anyway. By the time this interview happened, Malcolm had burned every bridge that protected him. He'd left the Nation of Islam, the only structure that gave him protection. He'd made enemies in the American state, in the media, and in law enforcement. He knew he was being watched. He knew his life was under threat. He knew some people wanted him dead, not because he was wrong, but because he refused to bow. And he kept speaking anyway. He didn't flinch. He didn't soften. He didn't hedge his words. He became even clearer. That clarity is what this interview captures. It's not rage. It's not despair. It's conviction. He sounds like a man who's already let go of the illusion that he'll grow old. He sounds like someone who's put everything in order, and now all that's left is the truth. You hear it when he speaks about the United Nations, when he calls for global recognition of black humanity, when he declares that self-defense is not violence. He calmly dismantles America's moral branding in front of a national audience. There's no performance, no PR, no calculation, just a man who has decided that fear is a cage and he will not live inside it. And that's what makes him terrifying to the system, because the entire American racial structure is built on fear, on intimidation, on making examples out of those who speak too boldly, on teaching people to look down before they speak up. Malcolm looked directly at the camera and never blinked. He was ready to call out everyone, from whites to black puppets.
And more than that, I would say that just because a person is a Negro or a black American does not mean there's going to struggle for Negro rights or for jobs for Negroes or anything else. I think that today you could point to a large number of Negro leaders who have consistently betrayed Negro.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has been betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the.
Damn. That makes a very. I want to stop right there because there's not much longer left. There's like 2 minutes or whatever, but I'm sure they're just going through their little shit. But that's serious because I can't find a leader, somebody that they put in front of us that hasn't been bought, that hasn't been a puppet. I mean, I look at all of our black leaders right now. They've either softened their message or they've been more cowardly. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be straight up honest. You look at Keith Ellison. That nigga was hard as hell when he was coming up through college. He wanted to. Now that nigga soft. Same thing with his kids and his ex-wife. I'm gonna tell you like this: the same thing that we get on motherfuckers, like we get mad about people. These are our leaders now. We don't want child beaters, but why do we have child beaters in our state senate? Steve Drzowski. Why do we have people that have been adulterers, that have been promiscuous? Minnesota's known for that. Mary Franson. So is Minnesota became the Captain Save-A-Ho ass state? Because it seems like we're more cared about victimhood than caring about making people sure that they're self-sufficient. You know that because that's one thing that I can guarantee you is that you go over into urban areas and you ask them why are they voting the way that they're voting, and they will tell you because they don't want to lose their benefits. And what do those people promise? They promise handouts. They don't promise change. They pass out handouts. So we became more in love with tokens than we have with change. Because look at affirmative action. It was written as corrective action. Not affirm it, not affirm it, but to correct it. And what did we do? We affirmed it. So Malcolm is right. America, they used to be racist, but now it's more criminal. We want to blame everything on race, but we don't ever want to hold the people accountable that do these policies, that do these laws. Because I will tell you like now, just like, and I'll talk about it next week, but just like they had this weekend. Maybe it was Monday and Sunday, the DFL, whatever. When Ken Martin was here, you seen Ellison, you seen Hoffman. They wanted to blame political violence on Trump, not on themselves. They didn't want to look in the mirror and be like, you know what? I had a hand in this shit too. I'm the one that allowed driver's license for all, because I watched the interview this morning from a lady in, I think it is Wyndham, Minnesota. Her brother was stabbed and killed by a man that shouldn't even been here in this country. Nobody's picked up that story, only but Alpha News, because everybody says a California man. This man shouldn't even have been in the country legally. He wasn't even here. That's what's crazy, because I keep on saying a California man. This man is not from California. And then I hear people talking about the guy that was in El Salvador prison. And why are they sending him to Uganda? Because they don't want to send him back to his home country because they'll kill him. So why not send him? He comes over here, can't speak the fucking language. So why can't he go over to Uganda where they speak Swahili in English? Why can't he go over there? Since he can't speak fucking English anyways. What does it matter? I don't get this shit. And this is, I will tell you right now, our whole country is fucked up. Our whole country is fucked up. Because I will tell you right now, people that shouldn't even have driver's license in America have killed people. The man, the man that stabbed. You know why you haven't heard about this story maybe too much? Because he didn't kill somebody driving. He killed them with the weapon. So when it came out that he had changed his name, he wasn't here illegally, but California, they give out driver's license to anybody. The same with Minnesota. So how can we not expect people to be voting and to be sitting here having commercials driver license when they shouldn't even be here? So that I don't get it. And then I see people, somebody got married over the weekend. The first transgender state representative in Minnesota. So what? That's an abomination. The man is cosplaying. You have a man cosplaying a woman who marries a woman, and then they're both females. Get the fuck out of here. The man got a dick. There ain't no way else to put it. The man got a dick. So if he goes into a woman's bathroom, are you going to feel comfortable and safe if your little daughter's in there and you have a man cosplaying as a woman? No. I'm beating the fuck up out of the dude as soon as he come out. I'm going to be honest. There should be no reason why you're in there with underage females. Come on. That's how far our country has slipped. That we care more about genders than actual human rights. Because I will tell you right now, there's so much criminal shit going on, but y'all care about racism. That just shows you how fucked up our country is. That we care more about racism that we haven't really seen in years. I don't see no white only and colored only water fountains. I don't see that. What I see is men and women only bathrooms. But see, they want to say the same thing. They want to compare that to Jim Crow laws, to segregation. Where if it was what's crazy is they have it so fucked up now that they're telling people that if a woman who is actually a man gets killed for not telling the other man that he was a man, they're going to tell us that it was the other guy's fault. Not that it was the person's fault because they didn't tell them. They weren't comfortable in their own shoes, in their own skin. That's what it comes down to, because I'll tell you right now, I can't change my skin color. I can't. I wish I could. People can try to, I know they say Michael Jackson all the time, he tried to bleach his skin, blah, 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 blah. No, the man was black. Everybody knew Michael Jackson was black. He got lighter throughout the years. Yes. Now, I want to go on to Sabari a little bit before I get up out of here. And I wanted to just play something because I don't really feel like a lot of people know everything they need to know about Bassem Sabiri, whatever the fuck his name is. So I want to get into Sabari real quick. And then I want to get into Shiloh Hendricks.
To clear a homeless encampment on a vacant lot near East Lake Street.
Yeah, but as Fox 9 reported last week, that property owner has been defiant, saying he will not evict those who have no place else to go. Our Bill Keller live in Minneapolis this morning following this and has the very latest. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Chanu and Hannah. In fact, unlike a lot of makeshift encampments we see, they grow on public property, often on easement. This one is different. It is set up on private property with the owner's permission. Now, for the past several months, as many as 45 people have been living in tents and makeshift shelters in an empty lot near a school. Last week, the Minneapolis Health Department posted a warning notice at that site declaring the encampment a public health nuisance. They cite a lack of water access and inadequate sanitation. Inspectors finding drug paraphernalia and accumulated garbage, including human waste. Now, the city has already issued citations and fines totaling $5,000 against Hamoudi Sabri. He is the man who owns the property, and he was cited for allowing the homeless encampment on that location. And the city gave Sabri until yesterday to clean up the site. Now that that has not happened, the city tells Fox 9 it will move forward with plans to sweep that location at the owner's expense. But Sabri tells Fox 9 he is committed to helping the homeless, saying that he doesn't believe that public or private resources are doing a good enough job with solutions, preferring his strategy of giving the unhoused a place to stay. Now, whether or not the city clears this encampment today, Mayor Jacob Fry has called a special meeting with the Minneapolis City Council tomorrow to discuss what to do moving forward, including potential litigation against that property owner.
So I wanted to go a little bit into Sabari, right? So I wanted to show you this. So a few years ago, I shouldn't say a few years ago, Sabari, the same man that You know, Fox 9 or WCCO wants to, in my eyes, uplift, has a history of misappropriating funds with U Group. You know, and that's the crazy part because, you know, let's go back to the year 2000, 2001, when this man was arrested on 3 counts of bribery. So I want to get into that because it goes into the city hall because it has to do with the pastor now, Brian Herron, and his admission to his federal charges because he went to prison for this. Same thing with Sabari and another person. You know, there was 2 city council members that were found to take bribes. And to be crazy of it, it's happening nowadays. But not only are there, I won't call it bribes, it's kickbacks because taxpayers pay for it. Let's be honest, right? See, damn, they videotaped it. Federal agents. That's crazy as hell. And it's like people don't remember this shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like we like to uplift people, but we don't ever like to talk about their skeletons. Because you know what's crazy? I found they said that he wasn't remorse. Why would he feel remorse? The man has CIA, Mossad ties. He's got Hamas ties. He owns the Camaro Mall in Minneapolis on Lake Street, where the Somalians be at. I don't get it. To be honest, it's like, can we get people that, not to just say that you changed your life, because I don't know how many times I've heard that people, you know, cities have done plenty of interviews with people who said they have changed their life, but only to come find out it's not like that. Because Rochester, Minnesota does that. Minneapolis, Minnesota does that. They like to uplift criminals who are still doing criminality things. They don't like to eradicate, you know, they want to say they want to get rid of gang members and blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. But then they have gang members on the payroll. It doesn't make any sense. In my eyes, that's called hypocrisy. You can't say one thing and do another. That's the way our country is, though. We're okay with people that do. We want to stand up more for people doing wrong than for people who are out here telling the truth and they want to get to solutions. That's the one thing that I'll never understand, because we fell in love, our society has, with sensationalism. We fell in love with horror. Let's be honest. We fell in love with horror. We're desensitized because I can tell you like this. I'm a 40-year-old man who, before the age of 12, had already saw a dead body. Who sold his first rock at 12 years old. Shot a gun at 12 years old. So the same people when I was younger that were leaders in our community, but they were a different kind of leaders for gangs. Now they're leaders for the city. You have Spike Moss. You have Clarence Hightower. What I don't get is how come motherfuckers don't talk about Clarence was sucking dick? How do you have a pastor that is sucking dick? I don't get that shit. How do you have a pastor that sucks dick? And nobody want to talk about it. And then when people tried to come out with it, the man was killed. Isn't that, let me tell y'all something. Isn't that sound funny to y'all? That when a man was going to come out, that he was having a sexual relationship with not only people in his congregation, but also other pastors. It's the same thing with VJ Smith, Johnny Turnipseed, Jerry McAfee. These people think they get above the law until the law shuts their ass down. And I don't want to see no, you know, that's the one thing, because I could be asking for a whole lot of death, but I'm not that type of person. All I want is accountability. I'm not saying that a person is bad, but you can't keep on doing the same shit and then expecting you're a community leader. Come on, man. That's what I don't understand. Why aren't people more comfortable in their skins? I don't get that, especially when it comes to BLM. You got niggas out here that are fucking with other men on the down low and don't tell nobody about it. They just want to keep it to themselves. And you have activists who were filming women without their consent. We have leaders out here that want to stick wine bottles up their coochies. The conversations be ridiculous. They be ridiculous. And then when you want to stand up for truth, they shut you down. Because I will tell you like this. All my trouble started because everybody that, after my first arrest in front of the courthouse, right, at the Derek Chauvin trial, I was arrested on the first day. But that's when all my trouble started. Because they didn't care, you know, even though I had talked about my case to other leaders, to like Michelle Gross, to who's she's now on the BET, but Samantha Pre-Gonzalez, and I have emails from these people. I have a letter. But then some of these people wanted to act like they didn't know. They wanted to act like they didn't know. So when me and Kia did Kaya, we did until the city shut it down. We stayed for a week. The first week of the Derek Chauvin trial, we did Locks of Love, where we stayed the whole week. The whole week was it was the whole week. And there was leaders like Makima, Jelani, Jonathan McKellen, that didn't like what we were doing, not because it was the right thing, but because we were getting, not that I even wanted the fucking exposure, because I didn't want, this is the crazy thing. I wasn't really never in front of a microphone until that day, until my first arrest, because till then I never cared. I never wanted to be seen as a leader. I never wanted to be seen as anything other than Chaz Lawrence Neal. Because I wanted to make change. That's why I did a resolution proclaiming racism a public health crisis, which was a stupid ass idea. But it was with good intentions. It was just, I was misled by Andrea Jenkins, by a transgender fourth ward who Vita beat, Philippe Cunningham. You know, that was the one thing, because people didn't start hating me until I went away from racism and started to go at the criminality part of it. Because nobody cares about that. When you speak about that, that's when they hate you. They hate you when you speak that. When you speak the truth, they hate that. So I just really want to show you how fucked up Minneapolis is. So I want to go into Shiloh Hendricks a little bit. She was charges today. Disorderly conduct charges. There was 3 disorderly conduct. Was nothing about, in my eyes, I feel like racism. So my question is, they moved 3 counts of disorderly conduct against Shiloh Hendricks, a woman who used racial slurs against a Somali. Finally, they don't even say black. Thank you, KTTC. Thank you. You don't say black. You don't say a black child. You say a Somali child. So then, how is it a racial slur to the Somalian child? Because, never mind it. That's their narrative. That's crazy because, yeah. So there was 3 counts of disorderly conduct to Shiloh Hendricks. And it's been it's been since April, and then it is charged her in August. I don't even think she lives in the state anymore, because I know she did the GoFundMe, so did the other dude. But then the crazy thing of it is why are we trying to press charges when this case first came out? We never even had the right family And then another person tried to come out who wasn't even the right family. And then we had the right family. I don't get it. So why are we in such an uproar and talking about justice and accountability when the bridge that affected everybody? Nigger on a bridge affected everybody. Nobody was charged there. When a white lady who has a black husband and has mixed kids had nigger on the side of her house and a swastika, there was never no accountability. There was never no justice. But a white lady says something to a Somali child. Yeah, I don't get it. That's why I say selective outrage. I say selective outrage because I know black kids who were being called nigger by Liberties. The guy was delivering and there was kids out in the street playing and he wanted to call them nigger. Nobody ever did anything because you know why? Those were 3 black kids. Not Somali, but black. Oh, maybe I didn't do that. Whoops. Yeah. It's been a long time. Yeah. A maximum 90 days in jail or a $1,000 fine. But the shit I'm going through, yeah, never mind it. Never mind it. But that just shows y'all like what we really fucking care about. And it isn't about the truth. It's about a narrative. We care more about a narrative than we care about the truth. So, and I'm going to leave it at that because that's the way it is. That's the way that it has been, and I believe that it always will be. I don't think that America would change. I don't think Minnesota would change. Yeah, it's crazy. This is Arrested Development, man. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like I don't think we'll ever get change. We get a lot of talk. We don't ever get anything that's concrete. So with that being said, I'm going to get up out of here, man. And I'll be back again September 2nd, and I'll be back new everyday podcast. So it's time for me to get out of my funk and be who I was meant to be. And I think that is the truth. Be a truth teller. I've been through the mud. I've been through the wire, you know, and I'm still here breathing. So I'm here breathing for a reason. And I think that's to tell the truth and to make sure that people learn the truth and not that it's racism or not saying that there isn't. But we're so past that. We're in 2025. Now people are being criminals. They're being very fraudulent and wasteful because there should be no way in hell that a president or CEO of a nonprofit makes $750,000 a year or even makes $500,000 a year. That's crazy. When we have people out here that are homeless, that's wild. Or we have people out here that are hungry, but yet we're paying people damn near $1 million a year. Come on, man. Let's be honest. Y'all want to change the system, but yeah. So I'll see y'all next week, and I'm up out of here.